Okay, so we've covered the stakeholders that are most commonly run into on projects and business analysis work streams. You know how to look out for your stakeholders' needs and interests, and you know what some of those common needs are and how to handle them. But there's a special topic we should cover, which is what do you do when some of your stakeholders need one thing and other stakeholders need something different, and the two groups are in conflict? Well, you end up with a pretty significant challenge, and it's one that's extremely common. Let's take a look at some ways to handle this. Before we get into it, I'll divide the challenge into three different categories. First, where the conflict is between two or more stakeholders outside your organization. Second, where the conflict is between two or more stakeholders inside your organization. And third, where the conflict is between stakeholders inside and stakeholders outside your organization. Okay, first category, when you have a conflict between external stakeholders. One of the best tools of business analysis for this type of situation is what we call stakeholder needs analysis. When doing a needs analysis, you generally look at some of the following questions. What does each party say they want? Why do they want that? What is the priority of that need in the mind of the stakeholder? And what are the assumptions, stated or not, that the stakeholder is making, and are those assumptions valid? Often, while you're conducting this analysis, possible solutions will just pop out at you. Write those down and keep trying to find others. Brainstorming solutions with other people on the project team can also help to come up with good solutions. As an example, let's say one customer is looking for a report that will have a certain set of columns or fields, and another customer wants the report to have a different set of columns. Well, there are several ways out of this difficulty. Perhaps you can create two separate reports, or you can create one report with both sets of columns included. Or maybe this conflict is actually illustrating the need for a larger requirement, the need for users to be able to design their own reports. You can see how creativity and analysis of stakeholder needs can take you from a perceived conflict into a new opportunity to make all of your customers happy. Another situation is when you have a conflict between the needs of two or more stakeholders inside your organization. These conflicts are generally a bit more visible because these are people you see every day in the office. What's different about this type of conflict is that we can start out with the expectation that everyone wants the best for the organization and for the project. But that doesn't necessarily mean that finding a solution will be easy. The best way out of this challenge is, again, to do a needs analysis, just like you would with external stakeholders, and look for solutions that will provide mutual gain for all of the stakeholders. But if this doesn't work, you have to bring the conflicting parties to the table, meet with them, explain the conflict between their needs, and explore solutions together. Again, everyone wants the organization and the project to be successful, so there's an underlying motivation to come to a collective solution together. We're going to talk about that very topic later in the course. One additional point I'll make is that the conflicting stakeholders aren't necessarily right or wrong. They just have their own interests. I'll just make up an example here. If internal users say they really need a particular function, but the project manager says there isn't enough funding to develop it, well, they're both right. But then it's up to the ingenuity of the business analyst and the rest of the project team to find a way around this kind of problem. Maybe to seek additional funding, or to find a way to develop the feature less expensively, that kind of thing. If you approach the conflict with this attitude, your stakeholders will certainly appreciate it, and you'll be much more likely to have a positive result. The final category is when you have a conflict between the needs of external stakeholders, usually your customers, and the needs of internal stakeholders. And these can be the most challenging conflicts to resolve. First, it's always a good idea to, you guessed it, once again, to do a stakeholder needs analysis. It's just a great problem-solving tool for resolving conflicts regardless of who the conflicting parties are. But apart from that, what I'll offer as guidance is the need of the business analyst to serve as the voice of the customer. As a BA, you'll have much more frequent interaction with customers than a lot of people in your company, and it'll often be your job to be the customer's advocate. Also, rely on facts. Statements like, Well, I've been talking with many of our customers, and 85% of them have stated that they want to be able to design their own reports. Those kind of statements that are based on fact, they have a lot more weight than just your feelings or your thoughts about what's cool. And finally, since these can be tricky situations, I'll recommend that you involve your boss or the PM if you're not comfortable with the discussion yourself. As an aside, I strongly encourage all business analysts, pretty much everybody actually, to read a book called Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Ury. The book came out of the Harvard Negotiation Project back in the early 80s and is probably the most widely loved book on effective negotiation today. I'm going to put that in the recommended reading materials available as part of the course's downloads.